She was handcuffed in the middle of her university campus, dragged away like a criminal under the stunned gaze of professors and classmates. Alana Mitchell never imagined that speaking up against a police officer's racist remarks would unleash a nightmare. While the bruises on her skin were still fresh, she had to endure wounds far crueler, cut in glances and whispers laced with prejudice. But when the truth came out, the man who had inflicted that pain faced something he never saw coming. Because the girl he thought was alone wasn't. And when the father, who seemed absent from Alana's life, showed up, the entire police department had to bow their heads and apologize. Where are you watching this story from? Drop a comment below and follow through to the end to see how the racist cop paid the price. Dawn had just broken, casting a thin veil of mist over the rooftops of Willow Creek, a small town known for its peaceful appearance and equally known for its uniform skin tone. Among the pristine white houses and carefully trimmed hedges, the modest home of the Mitchell family quietly stood out whenever someone new moved into the neighborhood. And for many, the Mitchells' difference was always brought up, subtly, of course, even though Alana was never invited into those conversations directly. Alana woke up early, as usual. Standing in front of the mirror, she adjusted her long curls, proud of the trait she inherited from her mother, Vanessa. Yet, even something that simple had been the subject of racially charged comments at her prestigious university. Your hair, it's very unique, Alana. Have you ever thought about straightening it? It might look more polished for important presentations, Professor Pierce had remarked casually. That comment lingered in her mind, resurfacing each time she stared at her reflection before heading to class. After getting ready quickly, Alana headed downstairs to the kitchen, where her mother, Vanessa, waited with a warm smile and a hot cup of coffee. You've got a presentation today, right? Vanessa asked gently, a familiar trace of concern in her eyes. Yes, for history class. I'll be fine, Mom, Alana replied, trying to sound confident. You always do well, Alana, her mother said with a reassuring smile. Just be prepared. You know, not everyone finds it easy to accept a black girl who's better than them. Alana nodded, feeling both determined and quietly disheartened. It wasn't a new truth, but each time it was spoken aloud, it scratched at something deep inside her. She stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, but the freshness couldn't wash away the invisible weight that clung to her every time she passed the judging stares of neighbors. Walking past the familiar houses, she tried to appear composed, even as the glances pressed in. One neighbor, Laura Whitaker, pretended to water her plants but not quickly enough to hide the scrutinizing look in her eyes. Alana caught part of her whispering to someone nearby, low but clear enough to sting, "Shame this neighborhood isn't what it used to be. Young people today think being progressive means lowering standards. That family doesn't even have a father around most of the time." Spiteful comments like that, though all too familiar, still caught her off guard. She often wondered, if her father, Darius, weren't frequently away on classified assignments, would they be treated differently? But deep down, she knew that wasn't the real issue. It wasn't his absence. It was their skin color. The bias was baked into the way some people saw the world. Stepping onto her university campus, Alana felt a wave of familiarity mixed with unease. She immediately noticed the quiet stares, not just from students, but from faculty too. A group of white female students sat chatting near the gate. When they noticed Alana, their voices dropped, and their laughter abruptly stopped. She pretended not to notice, but the whispers still reached her. Bet she's going to go on about racism again. Classic. Alana kept walking, head lowered slightly but forcing her mind to stay lifted. She had to push through it, not just for herself, but for others like her, whose abilities were always second-guessed because of their race. As she neared her classroom, Alana spotted her former teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Harper, chatting with a colleague. When their eyes met, Mrs. Harper turned and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Alana. I heard you've got a presentation today," Mrs. Harper said. "Yes, ma'am," Alana replied, feeling a bit of the tension ease. "Wonderful. You always make me proud." Be confident, sweetheart, Mrs. Harper said, giving her a gentle pat on the shoulder. That simple comment gave Alana a surge of strength. Amid the prejudice and doubt, there were still people like Mrs. Harper, people who saw her for her ability, not her appearance. The bell rang. Alana entered the classroom and made her way to the front, where, in just a few moments, she'd once again have to prove her worth. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that the only way to overcome this unjust reality was to persevere, hold her head high, and never back down. And as always, she prepared to begin her presentation with a calm voice, eyes steady, staring straight into the face of the bias she battled every single day, a bias she hoped someday would be nothing more than a distant memory. But today, it remained a cold, hard truth she had no choice but to confront. Afternoon faded quickly. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting dappled shadows on the quiet sidewalk. After a long day of classes and a presentation that earned discreet praise from progressive professors like Evelyn Harper, Alana walked slowly down the familiar street toward home. In her head still echoed a few thoughtful questions from classmates about her talk that morning. She was proud of how clearly she'd answered them, but that pride evaporated the moment she noticed a white and blue patrol car parked ahead. Its window rolled down to reveal the face of a police officer she didn't recognize. The patrol car crawled forward slowly, the hum of its engine steady, almost purposeful. Alana didn't look directly, but her heart began to race. She'd heard stories of black people being stopped for no reason, but she never imagined it would happen to her. Not here. Not in this neighborhood she knew so well. "Hey, girl," a sharp voice rang out, firm and commanding. Alana stopped, turned slowly, and faced the patrol car. The officer stepped out, eyes fixed on her with a probing stare. The name tag on his chest read, T. Grayson. "Good afternoon, officer," Alana said calmly, trying to keep her voice steady and respectful. Grayson stepped closer, eyes sweeping over her from head to toe with a thinly veiled contempt, as if she were trespassing on territory he claimed as his own. "What are you doing around here?" "I'm just walking home from school, officer," Alana replied gently, though a flicker of unease stirred inside her. He let out a dry, skeptical laugh. "School? Huh. You don't look like someone from around here." Alana took a deep breath, trying to keep her rising frustration in check. "I live just down the street, Officer Grayson, and I go to the university nearby. I don't think I need to explain more than that." Grayson raised an eyebrow, the mockery on his face more apparent now. "University? Really? Let me guess, you're on some kind of scholarship or special admission, right? Those schools love taking in certain types to keep things, diverse." Alana felt the sting in his words immediately. It wasn't the first time someone had implied her success came from handouts instead of hard-earned merit, but she held her ground, her voice unwavering, her gaze steady. "I was admitted based on academic excellence and top entrance scores. I don't need anyone's favoritism, Officer Grayson." His face tightened for a moment, clearly displeased by her confidence. He shifted gears, still sneering. "You sound smart. What do your parents do? Let me guess, your dad's in jail or walked out on the family, right? That's how it usually goes." Rage surged in Alana's chest. She stood taller, looking him square in the eye. "My father is a soldier. He serves in a U.S. military special operations unit. And my mother is a lawyer." Grayson scoffed, the sound bitter and sharp in the still air. "Oh, special ops, huh? That old line again. I hear that one a lot from kids like you. Always a dad serving the country somewhere far off. Who knows what the truth really is?" Alana clenched her jaw. Her pulse pounded, but her voice remained impressively calm. "If you don't believe me, I'm sure it's easy to verify. But maybe the issue isn't the information. It's the assumptions you brought with you before even asking." Grayson froze for a second, thrown off by the precision of her response. Tension hung in the silence between them, her gaze still locked on his, strong, steady, unflinching. "You better watch that mouth," he finally muttered, his tone lower, more threatening, but not as confident as before. "Being clever won't help you outsmart me." He turned and walked briskly back to his vehicle, slamming the door behind him. Alana stood still, her breathing fast from the anger she'd held back. Her hands, she realized, were clenched into fists. Not far away, Evelyn Harper, hidden behind a large tree, slowly lowered the phone she had used to quietly record the entire exchange. Her face was a mix of worry and righteous anger, but also pride in the student she had always quietly looked after. Alana let out a long breath and resumed walking, trying to settle the storm inside. The officer's hateful words echoed in her mind like a grating melody, but deep down, she knew she'd done the right thing, responding with dignity and strength. Still, she also knew this encounter with Officer Grayson was only the beginning of what would be a long, painful series of challenges. Bias didn't vanish after one conversation. As she disappeared down the street, with the evening sun fading behind her, Evelyn Harper stepped out from her hiding place and watched her student walk away, silently vowing that she would never let Alana face this injustice alone again. The next morning started off like any other for Alana, a new day to face the same stares, the same whispers she'd grown used to in Willow Creek. But something felt off. The air around her was thick with a quiet tension the moment she stepped out of her room, a subtle heaviness she couldn't shake. Breakfast passed in silence. Her mother, Vanessa, seemed unusually distant, stealing glances at her phone with a face drawn taut with concern. Finally, she looked up, her eyes searching for the right words. "Alana, did something happen with the police last night?" Alana froze, her heart skipping. "How does she know? How do you know about that? Did someone say something to you?" "Just watch this," Vanessa said softly, placing her phone on the table, her voice reluctant, her expression full of worry. The video nearly took Alana's breath away. It was grainy, filmed from a distance, but clearly showed her standing face to face with Officer Grayson. The audio crackled, but her firm replies came through clearly, while the officer's voice was absent. The footage had been edited, twisted, out of context, and somehow it had already spread fast enough to turn her into a target. Alana scrolled down to the comments, each one cutting deeper than the last. A young girl talking to a police officer like that? No respect at all. He was just doing his job, and she started mouthing off. Where's the discipline? Another one playing the race card to act like a victim. Typical. Each line struck like a needle to the chest. This wasn't just quiet judgment from people in her town anymore. This was public shaming at full volume, unleashed across the internet by people who knew nothing about her. "This isn't what happened," Alana cried, her voice shaking. "He was the one who disrespected me. He started it." Vanessa looked at her daughter with a steady, compassionate gaze. "I know who you are, Alana, but right now, we need to stay calm and figure out how to respond." On her way to campus, Alana felt more exposed than ever. Neighbors who had probably seen the video looked at her with quiet judgment. A few unfamiliar students whispered and pointed as she passed through the university gates. "That's the girl from the video, isn't it? She looked so sweet. Who knew she had such an attitude?" Alana lowered her head and quickened her pace, her chest tightening with each step. Even classmates she once worked with avoided eye contact now, as if afraid to be associated with her under the weight of this sudden wave of backlash. That afternoon, back home, Alana took a deep breath and unlocked her phone. She logged into her social media account, bracing herself for the storm waiting in her inbox. But instead of hiding, she did the one thing she still had control over. She told her side of the story. With trembling hands but steady conviction, she began recording. "My name is Alana Mitchell. I know the video going around doesn't show the full story. I was disrespected and treated unfairly by a police officer. I spoke up because I refused to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. I was not rude to anyone. All I did was defend my dignity. She ended the short video and stared at the screen for a long moment, her face a mix of fear and defiance. She knew exactly what she was risking by speaking out against a tide of online prejudice. But Alana also knew this was the right choice because this time, she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for those who hadn't found their voice yet, for the ones suffering quietly under the same weight of injustice. And whatever came next, she promised herself one thing: she would never regret standing up. In the days that followed, the air in Willow Creek grew heavier, more suffocating. Rather than calming the public, Alana's brave explanation only seemed to fuel the fire of prejudice that had long smoldered beneath the town's surface. The quiet, seemingly peaceful community now revealed its darkest corners, thoughts people usually hid behind polite smiles and practiced small talk. Whispers spread quickly, online and off, from Laura Whitaker's tiny grocery store to the breakfast tables at the local cafe. People began to spin wild, unfounded stories about the Mitchell family. That girl doesn't even know who her father is. Her mom works in a bar. What do you expect? Of course, she'd mouth off to a cop. Heard her dad walked out when she was a kid. No surprise she turned out disrespectful. The rumors grew like wildfire, twisting facts, feeding on bias, turning Alana's real pain into neighborhood gossip. People forgot, or never cared, that behind the screen and beneath the stories was a young woman now shouldering the unbearable weight of it all. Inside the warm little house, now wrapped in invisible cold, Vanessa Mitchell sat quietly on the couch, eyes full of hurt, as she watched her daughter. Since her husband, Darius, had taken on his classified military assignment, she'd grown used to loneliness and to the sharp glances of neighbors looking for flaws to pick apart. But this time, the pain wasn't just hers. It was cutting into the person she loved most in the world. Alana sat beside her mother, head resting on Vanessa's shoulder. Her voice trembled as she tried to hold back tears. "Why are people so cruel, Mom? They don't even know us. Why would they say those things?" Vanessa stroked her daughter's hair gently, her eyes red but her voice calm and strong. "Because that's how some people deal with differences, sweetheart. They choose to criticize and condemn instead of trying to understand. But you won't go through this alone, Alana. I promise you that." She held her daughter close, tears rolling down her cheeks, not for herself, but for the injustice crashing down on her child like a brutal storm. "Don't be afraid. We'll get through this. Even if the whole world turns its back on you, your father and I never will." Alana looked up, her eyes shimmering through the tears, filled with love and gratitude. In that moment, she felt the strength in her mother, the same strength she needed now to face the growing storm outside. "Your dad may be away on duty," Vanessa said softly, "but I know he'd be proud. So proud of how strong and brave you've been." Alana nodded slowly. Her heart ached, but her spirit was solidifying. She understood now, more than ever, that this was only the beginning of a long, difficult fight, but at least she would not be fighting it alone. Outside the window, night had fallen. The glow of porch lights from other homes flickered like signals of judgment, as if every living room was busy discussing the Mitchells in hushed, cutting tones. But inside their small home, silence no longer meant weakness. It carried the weight of resolve, of love, unshaken by prejudice or pain. Vanessa pulled Alana into her arms again, as if shielding her from every cruel word and false story. And in her mother's embrace, Alana could feel it deeply: she was not alone. This battle wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been quietly hurt, quietly strong, quietly resisting. So, they sat together in silence, their tears blending, but their hearts beating strong in unison. Tomorrow wouldn't be easier, but they would face it side by side with courage and love that no rumor could touch. Meanwhile, at the local police station, Officer Trent Grayson leaned back in his chair, phone in hand, lips curled into a smug smile as he scrolled through the flood of negative comments aimed at Alana. The cruelty in those words satisfied him more than he expected. But then, a thought crept into his mind, a spark of something meaner, more dangerous. If I can prove she lied about her father being in the military, this will get a whole lot more interesting, Grayson muttered to himself, his eyes glinting with calculated malice. He stood up, already plotting his next move, determined to expose what he was convinced was a bold-faced lie. After the social media storm, Alana Mitchell's days were no longer the same. If life had already been harsh, it had now turned unbearable. She constantly felt watched. Every step, every breath seemed to be scrutinized by invisible eyes. A suffocating sense of paranoia clung to her, slowly wearing her down. That night, Willow Creek no longer looked the same. People saw each other differently. And Grayson, the man who thought he was the law, was finally brought down by the justice he thought he controlled. And Alana, she was still standing, quiet, steady. She didn't need applause. All she ever wanted was to breathe without being on guard every second of her life. And she proved that justice doesn't always arrive on its own. But if you hold your ground long enough and brave enough, you can force it to show up. The arrest of Trent Grayson in broad daylight in the middle of a university parking lot was no longer an isolated scandal. It had become the trigger for an earthquake that shook the very foundations of Willow Creek. Outrage rippled across social media. Major news outlets picked up the story, and reporters from neighboring cities swarmed the town like hornets from a shattered hive. But what came to light in the following days would ignite a firestorm far more intense than anyone had anticipated. Captain Malcolm Reed's office rarely turned off its lights that week. What began as an internal review quickly expanded after Grayson's arrest for assault and violating his suspension order. As investigators reopened his personnel file, they began to uncover a horrifying truth, one that should have been exposed long ago. Grayson, it turned out, had been accused multiple times of domestic violence over the course of more than a decade with the Willow Creek Police Department. His ex-wife, a local nurse, had filed 3 separate reports, alleging both physical and psychological abuse. 2 neighbors had called 911 in 2017 after hearing screaming and the sound of furniture being smashed inside Grayson's home. A former girlfriend, an elementary school teacher, had once filed a formal complaint about being stalked and harassed. Yet, every single case had one thing in common. Not one ever reached formal investigation. The reason? Grayson was the nephew of Raymond Grayson, former mayor of Willow Creek and a key financial backer of multiple local political campaigns. The Grayson family owned the region's largest chain of restaurants and real estate holdings. The unspoken protection Trent Grayson enjoyed for years was a form of armor, an invisible shield that crushed the truth and allowed him to remain in uniform, free to enforce laws he habitually broke in private. When this information surfaced through a bombshell investigative piece by the Sentinel, Willow Creek erupted. Citizens who had long remained silent began demanding answers. Civic meetings overflowed with residents demanding reform. Headlines splashed across every platform. The abuser in uniform. Willow Creek, a town of privilege and silence. 10 years, no justice. A broader conversation exploded, not just about Grayson's crimes, but about the system that enabled and protected him. People began to ask how many women, especially women of color, had suffered in silence while the system looked the other way. The town's long-standing refusal to address domestic violence when committed by one of their own was dragged out into the light, examined under a lens laced with grief and fury. Then, during an unannounced press conference at City Hall, a figure emerged from the shadows of private pain, Vanessa Mitchell. Her hair tied back, her face calm but fierce, she stood before a wall of cameras with the kind of composure that only comes from deep, hard-earned resolve. She took a steady breath, raised the microphone, and spoke. "We have been silent for too long. We hoped the system would correct itself. But when that system shelters an abuser, allows him to wear a badge for over a decade, then silence is no longer an option." She paused, then locked eyes with the row of officials seated before her, her voice rising with undeniable force. "As the mother of Alana Mitchell and as a citizen, I'm formally announcing that our family is filing suit against the Willow Creek Police Department for gross violations of ethical duty, legal obligation, and basic human rights. We will bring the truth into the light, not just for my daughter, but for every person who was ever silenced, abandoned, or ignored by those who were supposed to protect them. The room erupted, gasps, flashes, then a slow rise of applause, hesitant at first, but quickly building. Vanessa Mitchell was no longer just the mother of a victim. She had just stepped into the role of a plaintiff who would force the system to answer for itself. At the back of the room, Alana stood quietly, tears welling in her eyes, not from pain, but from something much deeper. For the first time in her life, she was witnessing justice not as an abstract ideal, but as something real, something that could begin with a woman who refused to be afraid and chose instead to rise. In the days following Vanessa Mitchell's explosive press conference, Willow Creek barely had time to breathe before a new nightmare began to take shape, quietly in the shadows. Though Trent Grayson was locked away in the county jail with a growing list of charges hanging over his head, he hadn't stopped. He no longer had power, no badge, no uniform. But beneath the shell of a disgraced man burned a furious fire, this time not just personal rage, but the madness of someone backed into a corner and ready to drag anyone down with him. Inside Cell 3B, where Grayson was held in isolation under high-risk inmate classification, he barely spoke. He didn't interact with other prisoners. He didn't respond to guards. But every day at exactly 5 p.m., he wrote slips of torn paper, scrawled in cramped, furious handwriting, pages soaked in bitterness and venom. Those letters were smuggled out through the prison's underground mail system, slipping past oversight and exploiting cracks in a system he once knew intimately. The recipient of those letters was Dean Holloway, a former military comrade from Grayson's deployment in Iraq, once dubbed the Iron Chaplain of a now-defunct far-right militia that had been dismantled by the FBI back in 2016. On the third letter, scribbled across torn notebook paper like a call to arms, Grayson wrote, "Remember, Dean. Remember how the media dragged us through the mud? How the politicians threw us out like garbage when we stopped being useful? Remember how the blacks, the students, the ungrateful women rewrote the rules? Alana Mitchell is the face of that rotten America. I've got nothing left to lose. But you do. You've still got honor and a chance to end what they call progressive justice. I'm handing it to you." It wasn't long before Dean Holloway appeared in Willow Creek. No one noticed a tall, aging man with thin, gray hair, dressed in an old military jacket, driving an unmarked black SUV. He checked into a rundown roadside motel on the outskirts of town, no cameras, cash only, no ID. Officially, he was a jobless veteran looking for construction work, but in his duffel bag was a neighborhood map, a printout of the Willow Creek University class schedule, and a detailed folder tracking every movement, every habit, every location tied to Alana Mitchell over the past 2 weeks. One autumn evening, as the last light of day sank into a muted orange haze, Holloway stood in a dark room, speaking on a burner phone wired through a ghost number. "Holloway," Grayson's voice growled on the other end, still heavy with the same disgust he'd carried for years. "Did you get the plan?" "I got it. The girl keeps her routine, school, home. Sometimes she stays late at the library, alone. You want a scare, or you want a clean wipe?" Grayson spoke slowly. "Make her disappear, but make sure they know why. Make them afraid. Let them understand, when you bark too loud, someone will shove the muzzle on for you." Holloway let out a dry laugh. "You always were the poetic one, Trent. Don't worry. The little black princess is about to get a lesson she won't forget, one the rest of those self-righteous progressives will remember every time they close their eyes." Grayson whispered, like a prayer, low and final, "No cameras this time. No speeches. Just silence and loss." A few days later, on an unusually quiet night, Alana left the university library with an armful of law textbooks, planning to finalize the outline for the upcoming civil suit with her mother. She didn't notice the black SUV idling in the far end of the darkened lot. She walked briskly toward her car. As she opened the door, a sudden sound behind her caught her attention. She turned, too late. A large hand clamped over her mouth, yanking her back violently. She struggled, but a brutal blow to the back of her head dropped her instantly. Her body was thrown into the back seat. The door slammed shut. The SUV rolled out of Willow Creek, silent, unnoticed. 15 minutes later, Vanessa Mitchell called her daughter. No answer. Another 30 minutes passed, then an hour. Concern gave way to dread. She called Captain Reed, who was just returning from a city council meeting. When police arrived at the library, all they found was a shattered phone on the pavement and a faint drag mark leading toward the far lot. The news broke like a storm: Alana Mitchell was missing. Within hours, not just Willow Creek, but the entire state of Michigan was on alert. News networks covered it live by the hour, and people began to understand, the shadow of Trent Grayson had never disappeared. It had only changed shape, and this time, it had reached into the darkest fear of an entire community. The darkness around her was thick and heavy, like a nightmare poured in concrete. Alana woke up with her head throbbing, her wrists bound tightly with zip ties, and her throat parched. The stench of mildew and gasoline made her stomach churn. Her eyes took several seconds to adjust to the dim, flickering light of a single overhead bulb. Panic threatened to rush in, but she swallowed it like a stone caught in her throat. The room around her looked like an abandoned workshop or storage shed. Old, rotting planks creaked with the wind, and from somewhere beyond, the heavy sound of footsteps approached. Well, Sleeping Beauty finally wakes up, a voice scratched through the air like a rusted blade against metal, slow, dirty, and dripping with grotesque satisfaction. Dean Holloway stepped out from the shadows, gripping a flashlight like a club, his eyes colder than ice. Alana didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, watching his every move, scanning the space, calculating distances, exits, anything around her that could be used. Her breathing was slow and steady, but her mind was stretched tight as wire. You know, Holloway sneered, tossing her phone onto the table like a trophy, I thought about just scaring you, but then I read your words, heard your voice, and I finally understood why Trent lost it. You didn't just speak up. You tried to rewrite the rules. He crouched in front of her, eye to eye. I was in Iraq in 2006. Saw your kind, brown skin, twisted hair, eyes full of hate, kill men like my brothers. You think I don't know who you are? You were born from a crack in the system, raised on pity. And now you want to turn us all into your victims. Alana didn't blink. Every word he spat landed like stones, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't. You don't know anything about me, she said, her voice hoarse but clear. And you sure as hell don't get to preach morality after kidnapping an innocent girl. Oh, there's that word, innocent, Holloway laughed, standing abruptly. You know what, Alana? I don't have to kill you. I just need the whole country to see you cry, to hear you beg. I'll teach you, just like Trent did back in that parking lot. He stepped forward, raising his hand, but Alana ducked the blow. He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. I'm here to remind you, you're not a hero. You're just a dumb little girl who thought live streams, blog posts, and hashtags could save her. They won't save me, Alana whispered through clenched teeth, her eyes sharp as steel. But they might kill your silence. As Holloway barked, shut the hell up, Alana's fingers shifted with practiced precision inside the zip tie. Every muscle memory from her father's training flashed back. When Holloway turned to rant, she slipped a small keyring from her sleeve. A disguised device containing a microcamera with a live broadcast trigger. She had prepared it weeks ago, ever since Grayson began stalking her in the dark. It only took a subtle press. The camera activated. Within seconds, a live feed began transmitting, her bruised face, her bound hands, and a towering white man yelling racial slurs while pacing around her, appearing on hundreds of devices following her account. Holloway had no idea that he kept ranting, kicking her legs, calling her a product of fake equity, a media pet, a poster girl for woke manipulation. Alana stared at him, eyes glistening but unbroken. You know what scared Trent the most? She asked softly. It wasn't me. It was people like me finally speaking, and the world actually listening. At that very moment, phones across Willow Creek began to vibrate in waves. Social media erupted. The live stream, showing Alana tied up, her face bruised but unyielding, and the guttural voice of an unhinged man spewing hatred, spread like wildfire across every platform. And then the split began. One side burned with fury. Outrage surged as people saw the brutality, the sheer hate inflicted on a young black woman simply for daring to stand for justice. Volunteers formed search parties, calls flooded police lines, and the town mobilized in ways it never had before. But from the shadows came the other side, the anonymous accounts, the so-called neutral citizens, sowing doubt and spinning narratives, probably staged. How do we know it's real? She just wants attention. Their words echoed the same cruelty that had tried to silence her since the beginning. Willow Creek tore itself apart. But in that dark, crumbling warehouse, Alana Mitchell, bleeding from her lips and wrists, held on to the only thing that mattered, survival. Not just of her body, but of her name, her dignity, and her will. Because even when caged in shadows, her defiance reached far beyond the rotting walls Holloway had chosen for her prison. The old overhead light swung weakly in the warehouse, its sickly yellow glow flickering over fresh bloodstains seeping into cracked concrete. Alana lay motionless, her body limp, breath shallow, her fingers still clenched around the live stream trigger, long since dead. In her haze of pain, she heard the heavy footsteps returning behind her, followed by the dry metallic click of a blade being unsheathed. It echoed in the space like the ticking countdown of a life about to end. You thought your little live stream would save you? Holloway sneered, crouching beside her, his voice grated through clenched teeth, each word poisoned with the self-righteousness of a man who had convinced himself he was justice. He had discovered the disguised camera, and the realization had driven him into a rage so deep even he couldn't see the bottom. I'm going to end this noble victim act right now, he hissed. It's time you learned your final lesson. He raised the knife, his eyes gleaming with the sick thrill of a man who believed he was about to complete some warped purification ritual for the version of America that lived only in his delusions. But he would never get the chance. The steel door behind him exploded open with a thunderous blast. White smoke poured into the warehouse, swallowing the room in seconds. Tactical lights blazed through the haze, slicing the air with beams of authority. Drop the weapon, the command roared out, crisp and final. A tactical unit flooded in like a crashing tide, armored head to toe. In the middle of the chaos, a single man walked forward, not in gear, not with assault weapons, but radiating a quiet, lethal authority that froze the room in place. Darius Mitchell had arrived. His eyes cut through the smoke, locking on the stunned face of Holloway, who backed away instinctively. The Special Forces team fanned out to secure the perimeter, rifles raised, but no one moved. No one breathed, because they knew, this moment didn't belong to them. It belonged to a father. Back off. I'll kill her. Holloway screamed, still holding the knife, panic edging into his voice. But Darius didn't stop. He moved forward with terrifying calm, gaze fixed solely on the man who had brutalized his daughter. In those eyes was something deeper than fury, clarity, the calm of a soldier who had seen death too many times to flinch, now the calm of a father who had been pushed far beyond mercy. I know who you are, Holloway spat. Ex-Special Ops, huh? Now's your moment to pay for raising a treacherous little. At first, Alana thought it was just lingering anxiety from all the hateful comments online. But it didn't take long for her to realize it wasn't her imagination. Several times on her way home from class, she noticed a familiar white and blue patrol car discreetly parked by the roadside, the same vehicle belonging to Officer Trent Grayson. It seemed to show up on every route she took, always coincidentally nearby. One evening, after a late class, Alana saw his face more clearly through the car's windshield. His cold, piercing stare locked onto hers. Her heart pounded, and she picked up her pace, trying to shake off the chilling gaze. But no matter how quickly she moved, the feeling of being watched never left her. It didn't stop there. Even on campus, she began noticing Grayson's unsettling presence. One afternoon, while sitting with a few of the last friends who still dared to talk to her at a cafe near school, Alana caught sight of him standing nearby, pretending to look at his phone, but his eyes clearly scanning her group. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Without a word, she stood and walked out, leaving behind curious and concerned glances from her friends. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Alana was exhausted, mentally and emotionally. She began to question herself. Was it real? Was it just the weight of stress playing tricks on her? But her fears were confirmed when Evelyn Harper pulled her aside after class. "Alana, do you have a minute?" Evelyn asked, her voice low and serious. "Of course, Miss Harper. Is everything okay?" Alana replied, trying to stay calm even as her heart thudded. Evelyn led her to a quiet corner, away from prying ears. Her voice dropped, filled with concern. "I don't know if you've noticed, but Grayson has been around campus a lot lately. He's not supposed to be here. I've seen him watching you, Alana, repeatedly. This isn't a coincidence." Alana froze. Dread washed over her. Everything she had feared, everything she thought might be in her head, was real. The constant presence, the shadow that followed her, Grayson was obsessed. But why? What did he want? Why couldn't he let her go? "Miss Harper, do you think I should report him?" Alana asked, her voice trembling. Evelyn looked her straight in the eye, resolute. "I don't think we can stay quiet anymore, Alana. This is serious. He's crossed a line. But don't worry, you're not alone. I'll find a way to deal with him. I won't let him hurt you again." Tears welled in Alana's eyes, overwhelmed by Evelyn's unwavering support. It brought her a sliver of comfort. But deep down, the fear of what Grayson might do next remained, lurking. In the days that followed, Evelyn quietly started investigating him. She began tracking his movements, and it didn't take long for her to grasp how serious the situation had become. Grayson wasn't just lurking around campus. He was driving by Alana's house at night. Evelyn witnessed it herself, hidden in the shadows across the street, watching him circle the block in silence, the headlights of his patrol car flickering like a warning. Her stomach twisted with dread. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was something darker, something dangerous. Grayson's obsession was spiraling, and Evelyn knew it. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her small room, staring out at the faint glow of the streetlights. A plan began to form in her mind, bold, maybe even reckless, but necessary. She had to act before it was too late. She would confront him, face him directly, demand that he stop. Evelyn understood the risk, but she also knew that if she stayed silent and something happened to Alana, she'd never forgive herself. "Whatever it takes," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding with fierce determination. "I won't let him hurt her again." In the dim light of her room, Evelyn felt the weight of her decision press down on her shoulders. But she also felt clarity. Action was the only choice now. The danger was real, and the time to act had come. Outside, darkness still blanketed the quiet town of Willow Creek, hiding secrets no one wanted to speak aloud. But the fight against injustice was no longer Alana's alone. It had become a shared responsibility, and Evelyn Harper was prepared to put everything on the line to protect the young woman she now saw as her own. Willow Creek, a small, quiet town, was quickly becoming the center of chaos no one had seen coming. While Evelyn Harper quietly prepared to confront Officer Trent Grayson, whose obsession with Alana Mitchell had become disturbingly clear, he made his move first, fast and calculated, like someone used to operating in the shadows. Just one day after Evelyn caught him circling Alana's home and resolved to face him, a shocking announcement shook the university campus. Alana Mitchell had been arrested in broad daylight, accused of trespassing and acting suspiciously near the local community center the night before. That afternoon, as Alana left her presentation class, the sharp, deliberate clack of polished boots echoed behind her. She turned around just in time to see Grayson, in full uniform, eyes cold as steel, striding toward her. Without a word of explanation, and in front of hundreds of stunned students, he grabbed her arm, spun her around, and locked a pair of handcuffs around her wrists with mechanical precision. "Alana Mitchell, you are under arrest for trespassing and suspicious behavior near a protected site. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court." The courtyard fell into stunned silence. "What?" someone gasped, but no one dared step forward. Alana's face went pale, her heart racing. "No, I didn't do anything. There's been a mistake. I was never near the community center." But her protest didn't matter. Grayson dragged her away like a repeat offender, ignoring the shocked stares of professors, classmates, and the raised phones recording everything. For him, this wasn't just law enforcement. It was public humiliation, his payback, his final strike to silence the girl who had challenged him. Within the hour, the video of Alana in handcuffs exploded across social media. If the internet had been divided before, this time the outrage was overwhelming, and it turned squarely against her. There she is again, disrespectful and criminal. Raised by a single mom, dad disappeared. Of course, she ends up like this. She thinks she has the right to lecture others on justice and ethics. The malicious comments piled on, and now fewer people questioned the story, even among those who once admired her. Doubt was spreading, whispered, muted under the weight of viral judgment. Elsewhere, in a quiet corner office off campus, Evelyn Harper sat frozen, her hand trembling as she watched the footage on her phone. She knew exactly where Alana had been that night. She'd seen her leave the library and walk home, and she knew this accusation was a lie. Without hesitation, Evelyn pulled the surveillance footage, library, 10:15 p.m., night of the 21st. The video clearly showed Alana leaving the library and walking in the opposite direction of the community center. She had never been near the scene of the supposed incident. Evelyn raced to the police station, heart pounding, not just with fear, but fury. She knew that if she didn't act now, Alana would be crushed by a system rigged against her. Captain Malcolm Reed's office was modest but imposing. Known for his integrity and resistance to political pressure, Reed was respected across town. But Evelyn knew even he couldn't move without proof. "Captain Reed," Evelyn began as the secretary led her in, "I need you to see this, and I need you to believe me." Reed looked up, eyes sharp behind his metal-rimmed glasses, but calm. "Take a seat, Miss Harper. You seem serious." She handed him a USB. "This is proof that Officer Grayson fabricated his report. The time-stamped footage shows Alana Mitchell walking home from the library at the exact time she was supposedly trespassing. She wasn't even near the community center. I don't know what his motive is, but I do know this girl is being framed." Reed said nothing at first. He inserted the drive and fast-forwarded through the video. When the footage showed Alana passing the library corner, his expression hardened. He rewound it, played it again, then stood abruptly and spoke into his radio. "Get internal affairs. Suspend Officer Trent Grayson immediately. I want a full audit of the community center surveillance logs. Someone tampered with the footage we received." 2 hours later, Alana was released from holding. Her face was pale, her body exhausted, her spirit visibly worn after hours of aggressive questioning. Evelyn was waiting for her in the courtyard, arms open. She pulled Alana into a tight hug, like a mother shielding her child from the edge of a cliff. "Miss Harper, why would they do this to me?" Alana whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Because you're strong. Because you stood up to them," Evelyn replied softly. "But you're not alone anymore. Not while I'm still standing." That night, the town buzzed with news of Grayson's suspension and an open investigation. Some still clung to their doubts, but many grew quiet. The truth had begun to speak, and in that moment, the balance of power in Willow Creek began to shift. Alana Mitchell, though still wounded, now understood that a greater battle lay ahead. But she also knew one thing for certain: she would never again fight alone. And as for Grayson, the man who thought he could manipulate everything, he was now watching it all crumble around him. Because he had underestimated a girl, a teacher, and the unstoppable force of truth. Willow Creek had never endured a week this tense. The news of Officer Trent Grayson's suspension and internal investigation spread like wildfire. Some residents were shaken into silence. A few seemed to quietly re-evaluate everything, while others scrambled to defend him with hollow excuses, blaming occupational stress or claiming he'd been set up by the media. But no one truly understood what was unraveling inside Grayson's mind. Not even Grayson himself. He was no longer the proud officer he had once been. What remained was a hollow shell brimming with resentment. In his mind, every reason for his downfall pointed to one name: Alana Mitchell. She wasn't just the girl who disgraced the badge. To him, she was a direct challenge to his authority in a town he believed was his to command. A young black woman, propped up by what he mocked as identity politics, had dared to defy him. And in Grayson's twisted logic, that alone was unforgivable. That Friday afternoon, the sun cast a deep red across the university grounds, like scorched silk. Alana walked briskly through campus toward the parking lot, her backpack weighing heavily on her shoulders, her mind still turning from a political science seminar. Since being exonerated, she'd regained support from a few classmates, but the majority's cold silence still clung to her like a second skin. She reached her car and unlocked the door, but a sharp sound behind her snapped her attention. She turned and saw him, Trent Grayson. He stood just under 10 feet away. He wasn't in uniform but wore a tattered denim jacket and jeans. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot and unblinking. His fists were clenched so tightly that the bones in his hands turned white. "Let's hear you run that mouth now," he growled, his voice choking with barely restrained rage. "Ungrateful little. You think you're better than me?" Alana stepped back, her hands beginning to shake, but her voice held. "You're breaking the law. Step away, Officer Grayson." "Don't call me that," he screamed, spittle flying with every word. "I got suspended because of you. You disrespectful little piece of. I warned you. But you wouldn't listen. Now I'm going to show you who really runs this town." Grayson lunged like a rabid animal. His first punch grazed her cheek, but Alana twisted away in time. Instinct surged through her, no fear, just movement. She shifted right, weight on her back leg, left arm raised to block his next blow. Not only did she dodge, she caught his wrist mid-swing, pivoted, and used his momentum to slam him toward the side of her car. "You think some fancy self-defense tricks are going to stop me?" he spat, yanking his arm free. He charged again, sneering. "You're just another black brat, daughter of some, and a fake soldier no one's ever seen." Alana's heart roared with anger, but she held steady. Her father's words echoed in her head: psychological attacks are the dull weapons of cowards. Let them break themselves on their own hate. When Grayson lunged again, she sidestepped and drove her foot into his knee, buckling him. Without hesitation, she pressed her car key fob 3 times. The alarm exploded into the air, sharp and piercing, cutting through the parking lot like a blade. It wasn't just noise. It was a signal, a declaration to everyone within earshot: "I'm under attack." Grayson screamed in fury, trying to rise again. "I'm going to crush you, you ungrateful black. You think your kind can keep stomping on us? Without me, this town is a goddamn sewer." But before he could get back on his feet, the roar of an engine cut through the air. A black SUV skidded to a stop, tires screeching as smoke curled around the wheels. The door slammed open. Captain Malcolm Reed jumped out, gun already drawn. "Grayson, freeze. Drop to your knees and get your hands away from her now." Grayson froze. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced with something wilder, cornered pride. But even then, he didn't back down. "You too, Reed. Another black man protecting a little black girl. You people are all snakes, faking your pain for sympathy." Reed didn't answer. He didn't need to. Within seconds, 2 officers tackled Grayson to the ground, handcuffing him as he howled in fury. "You're traitors. I didn't do anything. I am the law here." Alana stood still. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes remained sharp, unflinching. Only hours later, video footage from security cameras and students' phones swept through the internet. Grayson's violent slurs, his attack, his rage, his hatred, caught from every angle. No one could deny it now. The story was no longer just Alana Mitchell's. It had become a spark that torched the thin coat of denial Willow Creek had worn for generations. The image of a peaceful, decent town had cracked. And through the flames stood a young woman, not asking for glory, just defending her right to exist. And in doing so, she unknowingly stood for a generation waiting for someone, anyone, to take the first step. He never finished the sentence. Darius moved like lightning, no warning, no hesitation. He dropped low, locked Holloway's knife arm with one hand, and slammed an elbow into the side of his head with bone-crushing precision. As Holloway staggered, dazed, Darius twisted his wrist back violently, disarming him, then drove a brutal kick into his gut, folding him backward. Holloway collapsed, skull striking the steel beam behind him, unconscious before he hit the ground. The tactical team surged forward, cuffing him at wrists and ankles, binding him tight, but the warehouse fell silent again. No one spoke. No one dared interrupt the man walking toward the wounded girl on the floor. Alana was trembling, her vision blurred, but her eyes locked onto her father's silhouette, like reaching for the last flickering thread of hope. Darius dropped to his knees, carefully cutting through the ties on her wrists with hands that had held rifles through war zones but now trembled as if facing danger for the first time. "Alana, I'm sorry I'm late," he whispered, voice cracking. The bruises, the cuts, the blood on her face hit him harder than any bullet he'd ever dodged. Years of battle, lost brothers, silent missions, none of it had terrified him like this, seeing his daughter broken on the ground. "I saw it all," he choked. "Every blow, every word. I couldn't watch. I couldn't let it continue." Alana collapsed into his chest, sobbing like a child abandoned for too long. "Dad, I knew you'd come. I believed in you." He held her close, pressing a kiss to her sweat-drenched hair. "I never left you, Alana. The moment that first video went live, I pulled out of my mission and got on the first flight home. I activated the locator chip in the camera keychain, yeah, the one you said violated your privacy." Through her tears, Alana let out a shaky laugh. "I hated that thing. But it saved you," he whispered. "And it saved me." They sat there, father and daughter, in the wreckage of hate and violence. Outside, sirens wailed, and reporters swarmed barricades. But at that moment, none of it mattered, no headlines, no social media, just 2 people, one who survived and one who came for her. When Holloway was dragged out of the warehouse in chains, his face bruised and swollen, the breaking news had already reached the county jail. Trent Grayson read the report with shaken hands, Holloway apprehended. Mission failed. Charges: federal terrorism, aggravated kidnapping, attempted murder. Primary conspirator, Trent Grayson. Sentence: life without parole recommended. Grayson stared at the page for several seconds. Then, with a roar, he slammed it against the wall, smashing his head into the concrete until the guards rushed in to restrain him. He had lost. Not to the system, not to the law, but to a black family that refused to bow, and who had forced the entire system to finally look itself in the mirror. Willow Creek was no longer quiet. 7 days after the dramatic rescue, the once proud town, known for its so-called racial harmony, became the focal point of a national reckoning. News crews set up camp in the town square. The old red brick buildings were now plastered with camera lenses, boom mics, and clashing slogans. A sign reading, "We stand with Alana," stood right beside another, "Don't turn victims into heroes." The American flag waved next to a banner that read, "Protect police from media fury." At Willow Creek University, once the place where Alana had quietly walked to class each day with a backpack full of history textbooks, barricades and armed security now marked its perimeter. Protesters lined the front gates, holding posters of Alana's bruised face above captions that read, "Not an accident. A system." On the opposite side, a small counter-protest gathered, sunglasses, camo jackets, t-shirts with upside-down flags, and the slogan, "Order is freedom." Inside the town hospital, Alana Mitchell was still recovering. A fractured sixth rib, 2 severely swollen wrists, and bruises scattered across her back told part of the story. But what required the most oxygen wasn't the damage to her body. It was the constant barrage of online vitriol that refused to stop, arriving minute by minute, as if the pain already inflicted on her hadn't been enough. She got special treatment for being black and loud. Just another fake media symbol. And the cops? No second chances for them. Vanessa Mitchell read each comment, her tears falling silently. Darius sat beside her, hand gripping hers tightly, eyes locked on the hospital TV. Outside the hospital, a group of white men waved signs that read, "End the victimhood game." On a local news broadcast, a retired sheriff declared, "Grayson might have gone too far, but that girl probably knew exactly how to push a man past his limit." Vanessa stood up, unable to stay silent. She squeezed Darius's hand, her eyes lit not by anger, but by something stronger, resolve. "They will hear us. Not through spokespeople, not through edits. From us, direct." The following day, a special hearing was held at City Hall. The oak doors swung open to reveal a room overflowing with citizens, the air dense with division. On one side sat black residents, immigrants, students of color, progressive clergy, and educators. On the other, retired police officers, conservative business owners, and self-identified silent Americans. Evelyn Harper sat in the front row, her silver hair pinned neatly, her eyes fixed on the hearing floor. When her name was called, she rose and stepped forward. The room fell silent. "My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm a teacher. I'm a mother, and I am a witness to what silence does. It kills." Her voice was calm but resolute, each word carrying the weight of testimony delivered not to a room, but to history. "I saw that girl mocked, beaten, kidnapped, and I watched this town divide, not because of the truth, but because of the fear of facing it. You are not afraid of Alana. You're afraid that if Alana is right, this system is wrong." Applause erupted from the student section and progressive groups. A few heads shook on the other side, some murmured disapproval. Darius Mitchell was next. No uniform, no prideful stature, just a father holding a photograph of his daughter, taken moments after she was rescued. "I used to think the greatest enemy I ever faced was the battlefield," he said, eyes scanning the room. "But today, I know a worse enemy, a colder one, indifference. My daughter streamed her own assault to survive, and people still asked if it was real, simply because of her skin." He paused and looked down at the picture. This girl once believed that if she studied hard, behaved well, and played by the rules, she would be treated fairly. But when she almost died, people still asked, what did she do to deserve it? No one responded. When it was his turn, Captain Malcolm Reed didn't step up to the podium. He walked to the center aisle, placing himself between both sides of the room. His face showed fatigue, but also a steadiness that hadn't been there before. "I'm the one who signed the suspension order for Grayson," he began. "I've pursued this case to the end, but I'm not here today to defend the honor of the police department. I'm here to say sorry, for not acting sooner, for letting it come to the point where a child had to live stream her own torture before we listened." The room held its breath. "I am committing," he continued, "to a full, independent, public investigation into every instance of cover-up, every sign of racial bias within our system, from the police station to the city council. And I will begin with my own office. For a moment, the room was silent. Then someone clapped, then another, and then a wave of applause swelled through the space. Alana Mitchell, still confined to a hospital bed, was unaware of what was unfolding. But soon she would know. The bruises on her skin had become the first cracks in a wall of silence that Willow Creek had built and maintained for generations. The Fulton County Courthouse in North Carolina was packed that morning. Over half the seats were filled with residents of Willow Creek. Some were students from the local university, others social justice advocates, reporters, or simply curious bystanders who still couldn't believe a black woman, unaffiliated with any law firm, had filed a lawsuit directly against the police department of her own town. The defendants, Willow Creek Police Department, were represented by a team of state-level attorneys, well known for handling media crises, the kind of lawyers who had helped police officers dodge accountability in more than a few high-profile cases. They sat in icy silence behind a wall of files, projecting the calculated confidence of institutional privilege. The plaintiff, Vanessa Mitchell, entered wearing a simple black blazer, no logos, no entourage, just a woman, a mother, and a former civil rights attorney who had left the courtroom a decade ago to raise her daughter. Beside her walked Alana, wrists still wrapped in white gauze, bruises still visible across her cheek, but her eyes clear, proud. Behind them stood Darius and Evelyn Harper, and a growing crowd of once silent citizens who had now chosen to stand. The presiding judge, a stern, middle-aged Latino man known for his fairness, stated plainly as the session opened, "This courtroom is not only here to examine one man's conduct, but to ask a larger question: is this system still just for all of its citizens?" The police department's legal team opened with a 30-minute argument. They attempted to steer the case away from emotionally charged images and focus instead on internal administrative protocols. According to them, Trent Grayson was a rogue actor, and every reasonable effort had been made to address his behavior in accordance with established procedures. They pointed to his suspension and arrest, arguing the system had corrected itself and that there was no compelling evidence to suggest systemic wrongdoing. "Your Honor," one of the lawyers concluded, "this is not a case of racial injustice or institutional abuse. It is a tragedy caused by a lone individual, not by the organization." The courtroom fell into silence. All eyes turned to Vanessa Mitchell. She rose without a stack of documents, no flashy PowerPoint, only a thin folder in hand, and a presence no one in the room could ignore. She scanned the crowd, then spoke, her voice crisp and sharp as steel. "Your Honor, the defense claims that the police department did everything possible to correct its mistakes. So, I ask, why did it take my daughter nearly dying before Grayson was suspended?" She paused, turning directly to face the opposing counsel. "We're talking about an officer who was the subject of 4 domestic violence complaints, all dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Records show he intimidated a black student in 2018. He was accused of coercion against a Latino teenager. Yet the department not only retained him, they promoted him and assigned him to campus patrol." Vanessa walked to the evidence table and opened her slim folder, documents that were public yet had never been fully exposed to media scrutiny. With each piece she laid down, the room grew more still. This wasn't a lone wolf. This was a system that created untouchables. And when that system encountered a young black woman who refused to bow, it reacted like an infected body. It tried to expel her. Her voice did not tremble, but when she spoke again, you could hear not just the advocate, but the mother crying out for the price her daughter had paid in blood. "My daughter was called a liar. She was beaten in a parking lot, kidnapped, forced to live stream her own torture to get help. And now you tell me the department handled it internally? Your Honor, justice cannot be a revolving door open to white men but locked shut for black women." The courtroom erupted. Applause thundered from every corner. The judge banged his gavel for silence, but the energy had already cracked through the walls of legal formality. In closing, Vanessa turned to the gallery. "I'm not here just for this courtroom. I'm here for trust. If we can't trust the police to protect us, what else does this society stand on? Justice doesn't begin at the bench. It begins with the courage of everyday people, teachers who hit record, mothers who file complaints, girls like Alana who speak up even when their entire town stays silent. She looked at her daughter. Alana's eyes brimmed with tears. I didn't file this lawsuit to win money. I filed it so that one day, another black girl can walk through Willow Creek without flinching at a stare or fearing a police siren that sounds like a threat. No one in the room could now say she was just another grieving mother. Vanessa Mitchell had returned, and this time she came to make sure justice could not look away. The verdict took 2 days. When the jury foreman stood to read the decision, the room held its breath. The Willow Creek Police Department was found guilty of willful negligence, professional misconduct, and perpetuating a racially discriminatory work environment. The court ordered financial compensation, the establishment of an independent oversight committee with public representation, and, most notably, declared, this cannot be treated as an isolated incident. It is a warning to all institutions built on privilege and silence. As Vanessa walked out of the courthouse, the crowd outside erupted, but she didn't smile in victory. She simply gripped her daughter's hand and whispered, "We haven't won everything. But today, justice spoke." While Vanessa was fighting in the courtroom, Alana was waging a quieter battle elsewhere. The pain in her wrist still throbbed faintly as she gripped the straps of her backpack and walked back onto the campus of Willow Creek University. The early autumn wind cut through the stone corridors, carrying with it the familiar murmur of voices. Only this time, their tone had changed. It was no longer mere curiosity. It was scrutiny, disguised as pity, or worse, suspicion. Some students whispered as she passed. A few nodded quietly. A small number offered genuine smiles, but between those reactions, Alana could still feel them, the sharp glances like blades grazing across her back. In her constitutional history class, once her favorite elective, the air now felt like a room that hadn't been opened all summer. Professor Randall Pierce, a white man in his 50s with neatly pressed suits and a voice shaped like a lecture hall microphone, looked down at her from the podium with an unreadable expression. There was no greeting, no acknowledgement, just a cold glint in his eyes, calculating. After class, Alana found an email waiting in her inbox from the faculty office. Student Alana Mitchell is requested to appear at an academic hearing regarding alleged ethics violations based on a report filed by Professor Randall Pierce. Alana sat frozen. In the report, Pierce accused her of using unauthorized materials during her midterm exam and of exploiting media attention to compromise academic integrity. He wrote that, given her current public profile, Mitchell has received undue favor from the institution and press, making proper enforcement of academic standards increasingly difficult. There was no evidence, just suspicion, just a professional intuition. When Alana told Evelyn Harper, the older woman simply exhaled. This is retaliation, only more sophisticated. They can't call you a liar anymore, so now they'll call you privileged. Alana didn't cry. She had no tears left. But the anger this time didn't blaze. It simmered, dense and volcanic beneath the surface. She stayed up all night reviewing every submission log, email exchange, handwritten draft, and personal study record she had stored. 3 days later, she submitted a request to hold a public forum at the university auditorium with students, faculty, and administration in attendance. She made her position clear: if I'm being accused, I deserve to defend myself, and the truth has nothing to fear from light. On the day of the forum, the modest 200-seat auditorium was overflowing. Even the hallways outside were packed. Students showed up not just out of curiosity, but because a slow anger had begun to swell, a recognition that Alana's struggle mirrored their own. Young people judged by race, by unwritten rules, by those who had always held power without question. Randall Pierce arrived on time. He walked to the podium with the air of a man long accustomed to authority. He delivered a short speech emphasizing the importance of academic ethics and not letting social distractions compromise academic rigor. He ended with a line that cast a chill over the room: "We cannot allow events outside the classroom to overshadow the value of knowledge. If we soften under public pressure, we lose the soul of scholarship." Then it was Alana's turn. She walked to the front with no script, no notes, no microphone, just a small USB in her hand and eyes that never once looked at the man who had accused her. "Professor Pierce says I've been given preferential treatment because I'm a victim," she began. "But he's wrong. I don't want to be treated special. I just want to be seen." As a regular student, one who had to read 600 pages of constitutional law while recovering from assault and drowning in thousands of online slurs, she inserted the USB into the projector and calmly displayed evidence: time-stamped records of document access, handwritten notes, email exchanges with teaching assistants dating from before the Grayson incident, and written feedback praising the originality of her analysis. "Professor Pierce says he felt something was off. But feelings are not facts. And when those feelings come from someone who has never believed in the intellectual capacity of students of color, they become a weapon, subtle, but deeply dangerous." She paused. "No one here has to like me. Not even Professor Pierce. But 27 I demand to be treated fairly, not because I'm black, not because I'm a survivor, but because I'm a student, just like every one of you." The auditorium fell silent. Then one student stood up, a white girl, then an Asian boy, then an entire row. A wave of applause followed, rolling through the room in bursts. Someone shouted, "Justice for Alana." Not from hashtags this time, but from classmates who had sat beside her in lecture halls. That same day, the University Disciplinary Board released its decision: all allegations against Alana Mitchell were dismissed, and Professor Randall Pierce was removed from teaching duties for the following semester, pending a review of his professional standards and methodology. As they stepped out of the auditorium, Evelyn Harper met Alana with a proud, glowing smile. "You didn't just win, Alana. You taught them how to see themselves." Alana smiled softly. The pain lingered, but her spirit had never felt lighter. 90 days after the landmark trial, Willow Creek woke up a different town. Once proud of its trouble-free reputation, the quiet community now bore new signs at the entrance to its center, Willow Creek Civilian Police Oversight Commission headquarters. A once abandoned house had been repurposed into a working office where any resident, regardless of race, profession, or age, could review complaints, access police reports, and help hold the local department accountable. It wasn't an easy decision, but when the very citizens who had long stayed silent stood up and demanded, "We deserve a voice," the town's leadership could no longer look away. At the head of the new commission stood Evelyn Harper, who had stepped out of her retirement as a schoolteacher to become the first public ombudswoman, now a symbol of conscience in an age of reckoning. Meanwhile, Trent Grayson and Dean Holloway, the mastermind and the enforcer, were both paying a heavy price. A federal court sentenced Grayson to 30 years without parole for conspiracy, abuse of power, and orchestrating a violent scheme. Holloway received 25 years in federal prison for kidnapping, aggravated assault, and hate-fueled crimes. In addition to their criminal sentences, both men were ordered to pay personal restitution to Alana Mitchell. Though the settlement amount was undisclosed, media outlets referred to it as one of the most significant deterrent rulings in the Southeast in a decade. But what truly awakened Willow Creek wasn't the verdict. It was the moral aftermath, the mirror held up to itself. Within 3 months, Willow Creek University issued a formal statement acknowledging systemic failures in protecting students of color and pledged reforms to address racial bias in academic environments. The university also helped fund a new educational initiative that would soon become a point of pride, not just for the school, but for the entire community. The Alana Mitchell Scholarship was officially announced at a special ceremony held in the town square, the very square where some of the most polarizing protests had once taken place. That day, the crisp autumn air carried sunlight that felt unusually clean, as if the universe itself nodded at the overdue act of justice finally done. The square was draped in deep violet, Alana's favorite color, accented with hand-painted illustrations from local students, moments of Alana standing at her school tribunal, live streaming her cry for help, and embracing her father after surviving the ordeal. On a stage, both simple and solemn, a university representative stepped up to read the scholarship's official title aloud, the Alana Mitchell Scholarship for Young Women of Color who demonstrate academic excellence, resilient character, and a commitment to community change. In the front row, Alana sat between her parents. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but from holding back something even greater, the weight of responsibility. When it was her turn to speak, Alana stepped forward with a slow but steady gait. Not from pain anymore, but from the burden of a past filled with scars and a future now opened wide, gleaming, but never easy. 3 months ago, she began, I didn't think I'd ever come back to school. I thought every time I closed my eyes, it was just to hide. But I'm standing here today, not because I'm strong, but because this community chose not to look away anymore. She looked out at the crowd, students holding signs, teachers, parents, business owners, and white residents who had once hesitated but now sat shoulder to shoulder with those they once feared. One scholarship can't erase injustice. One oversight board can't dismantle privilege. But it's a beginning. And if anyone asks why name this after me, I'll say, not because I was beaten, but because I refused to fall. This time, the applause wasn't loud. It was heavy, deep, a sustained wave of respect that spread like underground thunder. It didn't come from sympathy. It came from honor. Evelyn Harper stepped forward and hugged her tightly, whispering, "You lit the path, and now everyone can see." Darius Mitchell, ever the quiet father, placed a firm hand on his daughter's shoulder. Vanessa stood beside him, tears brimming in her eyes, but her smile radiant. No one said a word because they didn't have to. That day, Willow Creek didn't just award a scholarship. It made a promise that, from now on, it would no longer turn away. That justice wouldn't just be an event, but a commitment. And that sometimes, a young girl with bruises on her shoulders could do what 100 town hall meetings never could, force a community to finally look at itself. After weeks of slogans, TV cameras, and tense meetings, the small town that once seemed on the brink of collapse was slowly stitching itself back together, not through laws, but through actions and apologies. Under the leadership of Captain Malcolm Reed, the Willow Creek Police Department held its first public press conference in 3 months. For the first time, all internal reports on officer misconduct were made available to the public. A new digital feedback portal was launched, and civilian representatives were formally included in every internal review panel. "We cannot change the past," Reed said, his voice firm but calm. "But we can, and we will, change how we move forward." Meanwhile, in a quieter corner of Willow Creek, a very different kind of conversation was taking place. No cameras, no reporters, just 2 women who had once stood on opposite sides of an invisible crisis. Alana Mitchell, wrapped in a dark winter coat, walked up to the small iron gate of a house across the street. She knocked gently. A few moments later, the door creaked open. Laura Whitaker, the white neighbor who hadn't spoken to the Mitchells in 4 years, appeared, her face somber, her eyes quieter than they had ever been. She had invited Alana over. "May I come in, Miss Laura?" Alana asked softly. Laura nodded and stepped aside, opening the door wider. The house was still neat, still quiet, but this time there were 2 cups of tea already steeping on the coffee table, an unspoken sign, people can change. "I know you don't owe me anything," Laura said once Alana sat down. "You have no reason to be here, but I wanted to say thank you for not meeting my silence with rage." Alana didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned the room. Photos of Laura's family still lined the shelf, a faded portrait of her late husband in uniform and 2 sons, one of whom now worked at a police department out of state. "I was afraid," Laura admitted, her voice trembling. "Not of you, but of how fast the world was changing, and I hadn't yet learned how to love in that world." Alana turned, locking eyes with her. "I used to be angry with you," she said. "Angry that you looked away when I was dragged into that police car. Angry that you stayed silent while my family was called out of control. But I've come.